Hello and welcome to the First and 10 podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Feltz, here in Indianapolis, Indiana. We're recording this on Saturday afternoon, 2 days from now. The Ohio State Buckeyes will be playing the Alabama Crimson Tide for the national championship. Speaking of playoffs, just watched my Colts get eliminated here on Saturday. Disappointed, but hopefully things get better next year. But we've got an even bigger game to talk about, the national championship, Ohio State, Alabama. This one's for all the marbles. Reid, how are you feeling?
Um, I got a whole lot of emotions going into this game. I mean, I feel confidence, but obviously I don't want to get overconfident. And that was my main thing going into the Clemson game. Is that game meant so much to me, so I didn't want to get cocky or overconfident or expect too much. And after seeing the way Ohio State played last time, I can expect a win to an extent. I mean, I think Alabama is the favorite this one, but it's no ridiculous statement to say Ohio State will win. So, I mean, my expectations are higher for this game, but I'm trying to protect myself from the heartbreak that would come with a loss.
And that's the thing. After such an impressive performance by Ohio State, you'd be hard pressed in just about any other year to not think they could just go toe to toe with anybody, and they should be expected to go out there and win the championship in pretty much any other playoff year aside from maybe 2019 with LSU. But uh, this 2020 Alabama team is special, and we're going to talk about them here. So, Alabama this season might be the best team Nick Saban's ever coached. This offense, I think, is certainly the best Nick Saban's ever had under Steve Sarkisian, the offensive coordinator, new head coach of the University of Texas. They can kill you in just about every way. Deep ball, short ball, screen pass, running game, everything is on point for this offense. 3 of the 5 Heisman finalists, Najee Harris, Mac Jones, Devontae Smith, the Heisman winner. They are just flat out deadly. And this Ohio State defense has struggled at points this season, say the Northwestern game and especially the Indiana game, at containing some of these offenses that are, good. And Alabama is not just good. They have one of the best offenses maybe we've ever seen in all of college football.
Yeah, you're right about that. And you talk about how multifaceted this offense is. You're right; they have 3 Heisman contenders, but Clemson was a similar offense. They didn't have the wide receivers that Alabama had, not nearly as much. But I would consider Etienne and Najee Harris to be quite similar running backs. And I think obviously you saw the way Ohio State stopped Etienne. He didn't even get 50 yards on the ground against Ohio State. And granted, that came with a 400-yard passing performance from Trevor Lawrence. But Ohio State has shown they know how to stop the run. Problem with that is Alabama doesn't need to run to win this game.
No.
Especially with the Ohio State secondary. They can just pass the ball pretty much every single play and count on getting points on the board pretty consistently. So I think this game is going to have to be a shootout if Ohio State wants to win it. It's basically going to be blitz, see if you can stop them if you can, but the thing that's going to win in this game is offense.
And you talk about this Alabama offense and the passing game. Obviously, you're going to have to deal with Devontae Smith, who is one of the best receivers we've seen in college football ever. Just one of a handful of receivers to ever win the Heisman Trophy. I believe he's the third ever to win it. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. First since Desmond Howard back in the 90s at Michigan. So you got him. And then potentially on the other side of the ball, you got Jaylen Waddle, who has been out for a while, but he is a game time decision. He's been practicing, and it's entirely possible that he makes his long-awaited return here in the national championship, which if I were him, I don't know if I would, because you got to worry about playing one game and potentially getting re-injured before the NFL when you're supposed to be maybe the number one receiver off the board. Either him, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith will be the first receiver taken in the NFL draft. So I don't know if I'm Jaylen Waddle, if I'm risking my draft stock, but if he is back on the field, he's arguably just as good as Devontae Smith. And coming into the season, he was the number one receiver for Alabama, not Devontae Smith.
Yeah, you're right about that. And we knew Smith was a good receiver going into the season, but he has completely exploded.
It's been insane,
way more than we had expected. But I mean, you hear in college football nowadays, everyone talking about how football is evolving, and nowadays a good offense is going to beat a good defense every single time. And Ohio State's becoming, the game of college football is becoming a much more offensive sport. And really, it's good offense wins. It's not the whole defense wins championships adage that everyone likes to throw out. And this game is the perfect epitome of that, honestly, because I think the winner of this game is going to score somewhere around 50 points, and the loser is probably going to have sub-score in the 40s. This is going to be a high-scoring game unless we see something new out of both of these defenses. This is going to be a game where offense rules, and it's kind of the Big 12 defense optional game. This one, I feel like it's going to look a lot like Baylor TCU in 2014, or maybe the Rose Bowl in 2017 between Oklahoma and Georgia. Those are two really famous high-scoring games. Really great games to watch. Really exciting. And I think this will be a classic. I mean, I think this is going to be one of the best national championships we've seen in a long time. Two really stacked rosters. If you're a guy who loves defense, if you're an Iowa fan, maybe this isn't the game for you. But this is going to be a national championship to remember. There's talent on both sides of the ball for each team. Really everything you could want going into a football game. Two elite teams. And even though you could say Alabama's the favorite, I think the spread is 6.5 points in their favor. I think it's hard to say that this game will be an easy Alabama win, especially after what we just saw from Ohio State. I mean, that's a performance that's about twice as good as any other game they'd played previously in the season. So this is a whole new Ohio State team we've seen. And, you mentioned how this could be the best Alabama team Nick Saban's ever coached. And last year, you look at LSU. That's probably the best LSU team in history, and some people regard it as the best team in the playoff era, in the playoff BCS era, or potentially the best college football team of all time. But you look at last year's Ohio State team, and I'm not even certain that team would beat Ohio State last year because like I said, I'm still bitter about this. I will always say Ohio State got screwed in that 2019 Fiesta Bowl. So if they had gone to that national championship, who knows what could have happened? And it's a similar scenario here. You got one team who's, in conversations for being one of the greatest teams ever. But on the other side, you got a contender who could very well beat them and may be just as good. So although I think last week taught us a lot, or not last week, but the last Ohio State game against Clemson, that taught us a lot about who this team is. I think this is going to be, you can't really say the national championship is a test, but we are going to learn a lot about Ohio State and really a lot about Clemson. We're going to learn, if Ohio State goes out here, gets slapped around and beaten by multiple possessions, then we look at Clemson and say, wow, we really overrated them the whole season.
Yeah. A couple things with what you said. Number one, you said it, Nick Saban himself said it. A good offense beats a great defense. And this really is the epitome of that. You're absolutely right. And Saban has completely transitioned his team into an offensive juggernaut. And that's impressive to just look back at even 5 years ago where this Alabama offense was. And it was a real Tennessee Titans offense of literally just give the ball to Derrick Henry and pray he does something with it. Because you had whoever, Jacob Coker or Blake Sims at quarterback, but now they can light it up with the best of them. And it's really crazy to see the way Alabama's adapted to this new style of football, and Ohio State too, really. Even in the Urban Meyer era up to just 2-3 years ago, they did not play the way they play under Ryan Day, and they didn't have the weapons to do it maybe, but the scheme was not that. It certainly wasn't. It's a very different Ohio State team. And this is what college football is going to look like for the foreseeable future. It's going to be who can score more points. And obviously it's always who can score more points, but it's a test of score as many as you can because the other team is going to score a whole lot of points too. And it's going to be shootout after shootout in these big time games. So if you can get the ball rolling on your side early, I think that's going to be a big part to winning this game for either team. If one of these teams gets into a hole, well, I think they're both good enough to climb out of it. I don't know how confident I am because if Ohio State or Alabama gets momentum, these two teams don't stop.
You're right about that. And I don't like you talking about my Titans like that. I don't think our offense is that one-sided, but that's beside the point. And I like what you're saying about getting up early. You look at Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl. Obviously, they were able to come back from this and win the game in a pretty dominant fashion. But early in that game, Clemson gets the ball right from the off. They go march down the field, easy touchdown. Then Ohio State, it wasn't quite a 3-and-out, but it may as well have been. I think they got one first down, and then they were eventually stopped on 3rd and 2 on a really weak attempt. If Clemson gets the ball there, and they did, if they score that next drive, which they eventually did not, and they ended up giving the ball to Ohio State, and they tied it up with a huge Trey Sermon run, if Clemson scores on their second drive of the game, that's 14-0 early in a game where you really cannot afford to get down or get down big. So Ohio State right away, I think they kind of dodged a bullet with that with those early drives. and not allowing Clemson to get in the end zone early, apart from that first drive, I think they cannot afford to make that mistake again, because if you give Alabama the ball, chances are they're going to score. So you cannot miss a single opportunity in offense. We go back to that first Ohio State drive. It's a 3rd and 2. Ohio State calls timeout with about 10 minutes left in the first quarter. Kind of odd to call timeout there unless you really got something special planned up. They call timeout. They go for a rush up the middle, and it stopped. Pretty weak play, and you'd think after having that time they'd come up with something better than that. They can't afford some kind of misjudge or some bad judgment or bad decisions or bad execution like that. They have to be pretty much perfect in the beginning, and maybe later on in the game they can have a little bit of room for error. But early on, Ohio State has to make 0 mistakes. They have to be on top of their game, because if you let Alabama go up 14-0 early in the game, you can just say it's over.
They're
Even
toast.
if you doesn't go up 7-0, you might be able to call the game over.
That's tough.
It's Alabama offense. They're just so explosive, and it's so hard to come back against this team.
When Alabama took the lead on Notre Dame, obviously a very different matchup. Ohio State is a much better team than Notre Dame. I think everybody knew. All right, see ya. See you in the national championship. Bye. Yep. That's just how Alabama is, and especially momentum is everything for them. If you can somehow go punch for punch with them, you can make this thing last all game long. It's kind of like a tennis match, back and forth, and it just kind of depends on who can get that last shot and who can miss less, because it's going to be a lot of drives. There are going to be a lot of drives and a lot of points. Score more than the other team, convert on those drives more than the other team, get more big plays than the other team. It's going to come down to that. And, that sounds really simple, but it's not, because neither of these teams, especially given how Ohio State's been playing recently, they don't give up a whole lot of free punts, drives, 3-and-outs, anything like that. So you got to be extra careful to not waste a single possession, because you really can't afford to, or else you're going to get in a hole and then you're in trouble. So that's one thing to watch. But particularly with Ohio State, I mentioned how recently they've been on a new level. I really mean just in the Clemson game, because we saw stuff from them that we hadn't seen all season long. This looks like the full realization of what this Ohio State team could be. They were finally playing their hearts out, actually giving a full effort, a full performance, maybe not 60 minutes, but this was the best we've seen from them. And it's hard to see it looking much better than that. They crushed Clemson. I mean, can you ask for more than that? That was what everything has been building up to for Ohio State. They had not had a performance even close to that all season long. Can they do it again? That's the question.
Yeah, and I think so. And when we talk about the realization of this Ohio State team, I remember, I remember back in April when Trey Sermon announced he was going to be transferring to Ohio State. I said Ohio State's going to win the national championship. And I've gone back on that statement after seeing the way we played this season. But that Clemson performance is what I had in mind when I saw that Sermon transfer, and when I was looking at all the receivers coming into this team, when I saw all that this team could be. That Clemson performance that's what I was envisioning. Really, everything apart from Shaun Wade, because he was just horrendous in that game. Apart from Shaun Wade's performance, everything that happened in that game, everything that took place was really perfection. It was excellent execution. Everything you could ever want as an Ohio State coach, fan, teammate, whatever. It all happened in that game. And talking about Trey Sermon. What a player he's become just in these last 2 games. And I think in this game, it's going to be huge if he's able to be effective in the run game. But honestly, I think it's going to be even more important to pass the ball, because you look at the way, no team's beaten Alabama this season, but I think 2 of the teams who have come the closest were Ole Miss earlier in the season and Florida in the SEC championship. And the 2 things those 2 teams do well is they pass the ball. They pass the ball extremely well. They get deep balls, and they're passing offenses. And, when you look at the way they expose these teams, the Alabama defense, they're not getting – I shouldn't even say exposed. They're not getting exposed. It's just the quarterback hits really – you look at Kyle Trask, the way he played against Alabama. He hit perfect passes to receivers who had incredible hands and came down with them. It's hard to pass the ball. It's really hard to do anything against this Alabama team. It's hard to pass the ball well against them, but they were able to do it because they had the talent. Ohio State also has the talent, and I think – if you want to get points on the board against Alabama, it's got to be through the air. And Notre Dame had trouble doing that. But I think this Ohio State team is nowhere near what Notre Dame is. So I think passing the ball is going to be key. And I think another key when it comes to passing the ball is getting rid of it early. You look at Kyle Trask in the SEC championship against Alabama for the Florida Gators. He was able to release that ball quickly and hit his receivers. I mean, Kyle Pitts had a great game there too. And it's because Trask was able to release the ball early. He was able to find his receivers downfield. And I think the deep pass, you're going to have to hit a few deep passes in this game. But I think just little 15-yard chunks, they get you a lot of yardage, but it's not necessarily that one huge play. Helps build momentum, helps you get down the field, obviously. I think being able to get rid of the ball quickly, you don't want to spend too much time in the pocket. And we saw Justin Fields is good at that. And the real example that was in the Michigan State game, he was just lights. He once the ball was in his hands, essentially it was gone. He's got to replicate that. And obviously we need a big game out of Justin Fields again. He had game of his career against Clemson. And hopefully, he looked good later in that game, but you don't know how that injury is going to look. He said in practice he's been feeling great. And once again, Justin Fields, he's a tough guy. He's the kind of guy who plays through an injury. We don't know how great he's feeling, honestly, because even if he wasn't, he would say he's feeling incredible. So, it's hard to say how Justin Fields is feeling, but he's going to need to pass just as well as he did against Clemson, and getting rid of the ball, that's going to be a huge key.
Yeah, and defensively for Ohio State, you really can't eliminate anything for Alabama. There's not one thing you need to single out. Because they can run it, they can pass it in every single way. You can't just say, oh, eliminate the run, and then you can really stop this team, or stop the deep passes, and then they're toast. You can't do anything like that with Alabama. So I think the key here has just got to be slow them down. Don't let them run it all over you. Don't let them move the ball too quickly. Don't let them go 10 yards, 10 yards, 10 yards, and don't let them go 50 yards and then touchdown. You got to keep it slow. You want to control the pace of this game defensively, because you're really not going to stop them any other way. If you can slow it down and stop them from having an explosive offensive attack and just keep them at a solid, very good offensive attack, and just control the pace of the game and try and get the ball into your offense's hands any way possible, I think you're going to have a good shot to win this game. But one of the big issues is going to be, can you really do that when your defensive backs have been so terrible, not just against Clemson, but all season long? And this isn't just any other team. They're not just playing, Northwestern. They're not playing Michigan, Michigan State, anything like that. You're playing Alabama. You're playing one of the best offenses college football's ever seen. You're playing a Heisman Trophy winner at one receiver position and potentially a guy who's just as good as him at the other receiver position. And a guy like Shaun Wade, he's got all the accolades and everyone seems to love him. He just can't hang with that. He's just not good enough as an outside corner. So you got to think that if those guys get going early and often, and Alabama just kind of does their thing, and if Ohio State misses on one drive, if they have, 1 3 and out, or one turnover on downs, or one interception, or one fumble, or one thing goes wrong, you could be in big trouble, because 14-0 against Alabama is tough. Even 7-0 against Alabama is tough, because they're going to score every time they get the ball unless you do something spectacular.
Yeah, and talking about Shaun Wade, about how he's not going to be able to hang with these Alabama receivers. I mean, he couldn't even hang with Cornell Powell. And don't get me wrong, Cornell Powell's a good receiver, but he's not even in the same league. He's hardly even playing in the same sport as Devontae Smith. And Shaun Wade was talking about how he's excited to match up with Smith. I wouldn't be excited if I was Shaun Wade. I mean,
it's like, you ever see the meme of how he's got the mask where he's smiling, but behind it, he is just so heated, crying, frustrated.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Shaun Wade's like, I am so excited to face off against the best receiver college football scene in 30 years. This is going to be great. And
I tell you, I hope
inside,
Shaun Wade,
he's terrified.
I hope in this game Shaun Wade is going to do
so.
what all the preseason voters thought he was going to do when they voted him to first team All-American, and somehow he got that award at the end of the year. But he's just not. That's just not who he was in the Sugar Bowl, and I don't think that's who he is. I don't think he has that performance in him. Like I said, I hope to God that he does. But I think Devontae Smith is going to expose Shaun Wade in a way that we haven't really seen this season. And he's been exposed, but I think this is going to be a whole nother level, what Devontae Smith is going to do to him. And, when we talk about the Alabama offense and how the Ohio State defense can stop them, you're not going to be able to stop Alabama on offense, like you said. The best thing you can do is slow them down. But I think one thing you can really do to limit this Alabama offense is blitz. And I said going into the Clemson game, I don't want to see too many blitzes. I want them to sort of sit back. I was wrong to say that. Ohio State, they blitzed relatively well, and they obviously got a huge win. They need to continue that first and foremost to stop Najee Harris. I mean, if you're because the way they blitzed against Clemson, it was so hard for this run game to get going anywhere. I believe Travis Etienne finished the game with, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say 32 total yards was his.
Something
That was
tiny.
that was his rush total. It was similar to the Saquon Barkley game against Ohio State when he came in with Heisman odds and Heisman expectations back in 2017, and Ohio State just shut him down. And Trevor Lawrence wasn't able to run the ball either. I think Mac Jones, I mean, he can run if he really needs to, but he's not really the running quarterback that Lawrence is. So I think, first of all, this run game is going to be somewhat one-sided. When we look at Alabama, I think Najee Harris is their main runner, and I really hope I'm not going to get jinxed and they're not going to have Mac Jones running for 200 yards after I say this. But I think really Najee Harris is the only runner on this Alabama offense who's going to do some serious damage. So if you can stop him by blitzing, and also one of the biggest keys to this game is just do not let Mac Jones throw the ball. In Ohio State, their D-line, I have said this before, I think they have the best D-line in the country, and I think they can prove it. I think they proved it in the Sugar Bowl, and I think they can prove it again in the national championship. They have the best and probably the deepest D-line in college football. But in this game, just blitzing and just pressuring the quarterback isn't going to be enough. Mainly because he's a really good quarterback. I mean, he was a Heisman finalist. Mac Jones is spectacular. So just pressuring him isn't going to be enough. And we saw Florida, they pressured him pretty well, and he was still able to go off in that game. When you factor in the receivers he has, he can kind of just chuck one up, just throw up a prayer, and there's a good chance a receiver comes down with it. So you have to not only pressure him, but you cannot let him get rid of that ball. You can't just slip a tackle when you get in the backfield. You have to take him down with you. You got to make sure that ball does not get out of his hands. So in order to stop this Alabama defense, I mean, I think Ohio State can win this game while at the same time giving up something like 52 points to Alabama. And I think if you're a bettor, you want to take the over in this game. But it sure is going to help if you can make Alabama go 3 and out, or you can make them punt every now and then with a fierce pass rush. And obviously, Alabama, I think it's going to be a mostly pass offense, but they're not going to pass the ball in every single play. They're going to run it here and there, and that's a pretty obvious thing to say. So if you can get a few stops on the run and then maybe get 1 sack, that's what you're going to need to do on defense. Just make sure you blitz. And, you know, one guy who I really want to highlight in the last game, who I think isn't getting nearly enough media attention, that's mainly because he's a second stringer. He doesn't really get in on this fantastic OSU D-line, but Tyreek Smith, he is playing defensive end against Clemson. He's a guy, he's been on the team. He's gotten appearances ever since Urban Meyer was the head coach in 2018, but he's never really been the star. He's never had that shining role. He was incredible. I want to say he got something like 3 sacks against Clemson. He definitely, if they weren't official sacks, he definitely hurried the quarterback. He forced a fumble. He was incredible. So you need the depth of this D-line to show up. You need these kind of guys to be getting in. I also want to see Justin Hilliard play the same way he did, and I think he's going to be a guy who you want rushing the quarterback. Also just Pete Werner and Tuff Borland, they've had disappointing Ohio State careers, but they were fantastic in that Sugar Bowl game, or at least fantastic compared to the expectations we have for them. They need to show out once again. We need to see some incredible blitzing. And like I said, more than just pressuring the quarterback. They got to take him down with him.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about what it's going to take for the Buckeyes to win this game, but what do you think it's going to take for Alabama? Because for me, I think if you're Alabama, and I've said this, I've harped on this, score early and score often. And Alabama's done that all season long. Don't get too cute. Don't get too crazy with it. Don't do anything you haven't done. Stick to what you've done all season and what's worked, because what's worked has really worked. I think you just got to stick to it if you're Alabama. And how are you going to score early and score often in this game? Because they really have a different way of doing it every week. This week, I think it's going to be throw it to Devontae, because Shaun Wade's going to be covering him, and Shaun Wade is just not that good of a cornerback. I don't get the hype on him. Devontae Smith is going to probably expose him a lot. So I think you're going to keep going to him until Ohio State starts double and triple teaming him and trying to keep that matchup as far, far away from being exploitable as possible. But if you're Alabama, I think that's what you do. And if you can do that effectively, I think you've got a real good chance of winning this game.
Well, you talk about what Alabama has to do in order to win this game. I think this is Alabama's game to lose, and I think it's
Oh, certainly. Yeah.
I think literally for Alabama to win this game, just do what they've done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest thing they can do to ensure a victory or maybe get a win by multiple possessions is shut down Justin Fields, force him to make bad throws, and obviously they don't want to purposely injure a player, but if they can really rattle him, get him off tempo, and potentially if Justin Fields does re-injure himself or get some sort of rib injury, then obviously if CJ Stroud is the quarterback, I mean, I love CJ Stroud, but I don't know if I can say he's going to lead this team to a national championship win. I guess you say if Alabama can stop Justin Fields, then they got the win here. But honestly, I think it's going to take Ohio State to make an extraordinary performance to win this game. I think if both teams play the way they played last week, or maybe not last week, because Alabama, they let up in the end. They didn't play 60 minutes of their best football. But if both of these teams play at their best or at what we've seen from them, Alabama's going to win the game. It's going to take Ohio State to go above and beyond. So,
that's what took against Clemson.
Yeah. And when we talk about Alabama's keys, I mean, like I said, they need to basically just play their game. And maybe if they can stop Trey Sermon and make Ohio State have to pass every single drive, that could hurt them, because Trey Sermon, while the passing game was incredible, that's a much closer game if Trey Sermon doesn't play the way he does in the Sugar Bowl. And also Master Teague, he was out with a concussion. Not sure if he'll be back for the national championship. I haven't seen any word on that yet. But, I mean, maybe if they can limit Trey Sermon. But like I said, it just – Alabama's going to need to play their game to win this game. It's going to have to be Ohio State who plays extraordinarily. And I think, obviously, Ohio State needs to play fantastic all around. But I think it's the D-line that's going to win it for Ohio State if they do get the win. And, we talk about how great offense beats great defense 10 times out of 10 in college football. And good offense beats great defense pretty often. I think you can kind of count on this Ohio State offense to show up the way they have. And even in their bad games, they played against a tremendous Indiana defense, had a pretty poor game. I mean, Master Teague looked pretty good. Garrett Wilson was all right. But other than that, pretty terrible from the Ohio State offense. They still scored 42 in Indiana. So I think you can count on the Ohio State offense to do great. I think in order to win, the thing that's going to really set these two teams apart, or the really deciding factor, is going to be, can the Ohio State defensive line get the sacks they need, get the quarterback hurries, get the tackles for losses? And one thing Alabama does well is they throw screen passes to Devontae Smith, potentially Jaylen Waddle too. If they can, that's a perfect play for a guy like Justin Hilliard. If Ohio State can get these tackles behind the line of scrimmage, that is going to be the thing that sets them apart. Because if they do that, Alabama's still going to score a point somewhere. Their point total is going to be somewhere in the 40s ballpark, potentially even 50s. But essentially, if Ohio State can make Alabama punt the ball 3 or 4 times, I like their chances to win the game. So I think that's going to be the real deciding factor. That's the huge part that Ohio State needs in order to get a victory here.
And now the ultimate question, Reid, do you think Ohio State is going to win this game, or do you think Alabama prevails?
Well, Pat, let me put it this way. I think the final score of this game is going to be, let's say, it's going to be somewhere in the 50s to somewhere in the 40s. I'm going to go ahead and say the final score is going to be 59 to, I'll say 59-49. That's going to be my final score in this game. And the over-under in this game is 75. And I think that's an incredibly high over-under, but I think you can still pretty confidently say it's going to be the over. 59-49 is my final score. The winner is going to have to score a hell of a lot of points. And I will say my official pick is going to be Alabama, because last week I picked against Ohio State and they got the win. So I'm a superstitious guy for my own superstition, because I want to see my team win. I'm picking against them. Please, to the jinx gods or spirits or whatever, let that be the deciding factor, the fact that I picked against my team. But aside from that being my official pick, I'm not going to give you a winner. I'm just telling you, it's got to be a high scoring game. And I mainly I don't want to tell you that Ohio State's going to win the game, because if I do, I feel like we don't have a shot. Like I said, maybe that's ridiculous of me, and maybe I'm being too superstitious, but this game means so much to me that I don't want to really take any sort of risk or say something that's going to come back to bite me if we end up getting embarrassed. So I'll say no comment on who's going to win this game. That's my official statement, but I think it'll be high scoring regardless, and I think it's going to mainly come down to who punts the ball the fewest amount of times.
I agree. 52-45 is my final score. And Reid, do you want me to do it?
Go ahead and do it.
I'm going to do it. Ohio State's going to win. Ohio State's going to win 52-45. I don't think they're the better team. I really don't think they're the better team. I think this Alabama team is incredible. I think this Ohio State team is very, very, very good. I think Alabama's got a better team. I don't know why I'm picking Ohio State in all honesty, but I've got a feeling. And you know what? I had a feeling last week too. I had a feeling when they played Clemson. And
you had a feeling during Indiana Penn State.
I had a feeling for Indiana Penn State. I had a feeling for Indiana and Ohio State, and I was ultimately wrong about that one, but I was close.
You're 3 for 4 on feelings. So
yeah,
you're batting 750. That's way Hall of Fame.
My gut tells me Ohio State wins this one. I want to pick Alabama. I think Alabama's got a better team. And the smart pick here is Alabama. Something in my head when I just tell myself Alabama is going to win this game, it just doesn't feel right. It just does not feel right. Like in my head, it hurts a little bit. Like it just does not sit right with me. I can't picture Ohio State losing this game.
You know, Pat, I feel the same way. And I think part of that reason is because Ohio State plays so well as underdogs. And, you know, when they're counted out, I mean, they just went out. You got to imagine this Ohio State team is still pissed. They just went out and beat Clemson. They slaughtered Clemson.
It's funny how fast the narrative changes around this team. They went from they shouldn't even be in the playoff to can they beat Alabama?
But I mean, some people aren't even considering Ohio State that they can beat Alabama
and that's the thing. Yeah,
because you look on social media, you look on Twitter, and sometimes even you look at radio shows or TV analysts. You look at this Ohio State team. They just beat Clemson by 21 points. That in itself is an incredible feat. But honestly, they should have beaten Clemson by even more. And I would make that argument. So, I mean, I would say Ohio State's best game is about 21, maybe even 28 points better than Clemson. And that was their best game. So, I mean, you look at Ohio State throughout the season and you look at just on paper, and you can say, well, maybe Alabama's the better team. But I honestly can't fully 100% say Alabama's the better team because you look at Ohio State, obviously their secondary is bad. And their secondary is what almost cost them against Indiana, and it's what almost cost them a lot of times this season. But you look at that D-line, best D-line in the country, deepest D-line in the country. You look at the linebacking core, not incredible, but a huge step up from what we've seen in the past. I would say they have – I think Alabama and Ohio State have the two best wide receiving cores in the nation. And I think it really comes to, I think Alabama has the best receiver in the nation, but you look at the total unit and you could make a case for Ohio State. I'm not going to sit here and make that case, and I'll go ahead and concede that Alabama has the number one receiving core in the nation, and I'll say Ohio State is number two. But either way, incredible receiving core. As much as I respect Mac Jones and as bad as Justin Fields has been for a guy who has Heisman expectations going into the season, I say Justin Fields is still the better quarterback in this game. And he really showed it last week.
Oh, absolutely. 6 touchdowns against Clemson.
And he was doing that all injured. I mean, that just speaks volumes to the kind of player he is. I don't think Mac Jones does that. Now, again, do not get it misconstructed in any sort of way. I have a ton of respect for Mac Jones, and I do think he's a clear top 5 quarterback in the nation. And you can make the case for him being maybe number 3 behind Fields and Lawrence, or maybe 4 if you like Trask a lot. Really depending on your personal preference.
Where my Zach Wilson guys at?
Yeah, but I mean, I think you're a fool if you don't consider Mac Jones to be a top 5 quarterback in the nation. So see, this is what I'm saying. These two teams are so evenly matched. Looking at the entire season, you say Najee Harris is the better running back in these two games, or between these two teams in this game. But you look at the last 2 games, Trey Sermon, man, he has made a case for himself. 2 so evenly matched teams. And I think the only real flaw in Ohio State's game is the defensive backs. So I don't think you can really clearly say that Alabama is the better team, but you look at what everyone's saying going in this game. You look at the way Ohio State just beat the tar out of Clemson, and some people are still saying they have no shot in this game. It's going to be a huge Alabama blowout. They should have never been here. The people are still saying they should never have been here in the first place after that Sugar Bowl win. And like you said last week, they don't have the earmuffs and blinders. They see and hear all these things. And after the Clemson game, all the players were in the locker room talking about not bad for the number 11 team in the country. They hear all this stuff, and you got to assume they're going to hear all this chatter going to the Alabama game. They still have a lot to prove. And I think when you look at a team who's so evenly matched with Alabama, I think Ohio State and Alabama are right there with each other. And, you can look at this Alabama team, say, this is arguably one of the best teams in college football history. I mean, I think Ohio State is right there with them. You look at each position group. I think that's a fair argument to make. And especially you look at last week was their first complete game of the season. You look how they played in the game where everything went right. You look at their truest complete game. I mean, I don't know how you can say this Ohio State team doesn't have a shot. So to anybody who says that, I'm just not following that logic. And I see what you're saying, Patrick. I have that same gut feeling that Ohio State's going to win this game. I just don't want to sit here and predict it because I feel like if I do, it's not going to go our way. So my official pick is Alabama by 10, or maybe by like 7 or something. But I got that same gut feeling, and I think honestly, if Ohio State wins this game, it's not going to be a fluke. I think if Ohio State is the winner, they are the genuine better team. And I think this is going to be a game where really, you look at any college football result and you say the winner is the better team most times. But I think this is the game where I don't think an argument can be made. And if Ohio State wins this game, people are going to say it's a fluke. And they're going to say they're going to hit you with one of two arguments. They're going to say they played fewer games, they were more well-rested, yada, yada, yada. Or they're going to say it was a fluke, Alabama's the better team, they had a Heisman receiver, they had 3 Heisman candidates. Those are going to be the two arguments. I think none of that matters. I think the winner of this game is the best team in college football. I think there's no fluke. Every team, both teams, they've had plenty of time to prepare. They had everything they need to win this game. I think the winner is the true better team. And I got the same gut feeling as you, but not going to be my official pick. I got the Tide 59-49.
Can I tell you another thing we didn't even talk about?
Let's hear it.
When a coordinator takes a job during bowl season, they check out a little bit every time, even if they don't explicitly
look at it
in their mind. Like, obviously, nobody ever goes out to the press and says, I don't care about this bowl game because I'm the new coach somewhere else. In their mind, even if, say, they really think, all right, I'm going to focus on this one more game, it's kind of tough to. It's tough to care as much. We even saw it in Indiana's bowl game. Kane Womack did not look like the same coach he was for the rest of the season. He took the head coaching job at South Alabama. Steve Sarkisian took the job at Texas. Who knows if the offense looks the same? Because when a coordinator takes a new head coaching job, that is not a one-off thing. It's not a rarity. In fact, it's more common than not, I would say, for that position group to take a step back.
I agree with you. And, talking about factors in this game, or things like that, I want to take a second to talk about Jaylen Waddle, because a lot of people are talking about, well, if Jaylen Waddle plays this game, it's over. Alabama's got a huge win. I disagree. I think Jaylen Waddle, like you're saying, he might not play at all. Obviously, he has lots of draft stock. He doesn't want to hurt that draft stock. He doesn't want to get injured. He doesn't really want to risk anything, you've got to imagine. And it is a national championship. And I know that the Alabama team, the Alabama players have a lot of pride in that program. And it's a program where rarely do you see a guy opt out of a game like this. So the national championship, it's not just the Cotton Bowl or the Peach Bowl or whatever. This is a game that really matters to these players. So we could see the Jaylen Waddle. I think if he plays, it makes little to no difference. And here's why. That's not to say that he's not an elite receiver or he's not one of the best receivers in college football. That's just because Ohio State's secondary is so bad and the Alabama receiving core is so deep. It doesn't matter if you put your 4th or 5th string receiver up against, say, Sevyn Banks. You throw a deep ball to him or you throw a 50-50 ball, he's going to come down to it, or he's going to come down with it. So, while Jaylen Waddle's an electric player and he can do a lot, I think it doesn't matter who's playing at receiver for Alabama. I think any receiver in this receiving core can do some serious damage against Ohio State. So I think the Waddle factor is essentially not even there. And it actually could hurt Alabama because you look at a guy who hasn't played in a long, long time. He's been injured for, who knows how long. I mean, he might come back rusty, and that part
It's
that
tough
could be
to get
part of
back
the
into
reason.
the flow of things on the biggest stage in all of college football. That's tough.
Especially in the national championship, the biggest game of the
That
season.
can mess with your momentum and mess with the flow of your offense. I'm not saying, and Reid, I'm completely with you. I'm not saying that Alabama is a worse team with Jaylen Waddle, but maybe in this one situation, they won't be the same team. So it'll take them a little bit. Maybe it takes them a drive to get acclimated to having him back out there. Maybe it takes a drive for him to be the same player. Maybe he drops a pass. Maybe he misses a route. I don't know. It's just tough to get back into the swing of things in this sport, in this environment, in this stage. That's tough. So I'm not saying they're a worse team, but that's hard. That's
you can't
really
unquestionably
hard.
say they're going to be better with him. And to the people who are saying, well, since Waddle's in this team and he's a good receiver, that's the game. Ohio or Alabama wins it. You know what I call that? Lazy analysis. You see one little change and you say, oh, well, that's going to decide the game.
Reid is coming for the throat.
I think that's just laziness. To anybody who sits there and say that, and I think you can look at who Waddle is, and I think if you can truly sit there and think about it and say, well, I think he actually is. I'm not saying if you think that Waddle playing this game is going to help them, you're a lazy analyst or you're a lazy journalist or whatever. That's a completely valid take to have. But I've seen a lot of people say, oh, well, Waddle's playing this game, no chance. That's laziness. And I think it definitely should be at least considered. Waddle may well come into this game and have an incredible game, have the game of his career. Who knows? But you can't 100% certainly say that. And I think that could actually hurt Alabama. I said it before. When you talk about getting in the swing of things, getting the right momentum, that could hurt them. But also, even if he does have a great game, like I said, it might not help them at all because you put Sevyn Banks or Marcus Hooker or some of these defensive backs up against maybe the fourth best receiver in Alabama, they're still going to come up with that deep ball catch. They're still going to get that 3rd and 15 play if it gets out of his hands. So I think the wide receiver versus secondary matchup, it's almost irrelevant because the receivers are going to get their way. It's really going to come down to it's going to come down to the D-line. If they can get past the Alabama O-line, if Mac Jones can evade pressure, it's going to come down to Ohio State's D-line. That's going to be the deciding factor in this game. The receivers are going to get their way. That's going to happen. Not even worth talking about. So the real deciding factor in the Ohio State defense in terms of and I think this game for the Ohio State defense is a matter of will they give up 28 points or will they give up 58 points? It's not a matter of if they give up big plays or if they give up points. It's a matter of how much, to what extent. So if they can limit that as much as possible, that's going to be what wins it for them. And I just got that gut feeling. I believe in the D-line. I don't want to say I believe in the linebackers.
After last week, that's kind of reasonable.
Well, I believe in Justin Hilliard. I'll tell you that much. I believe in that man to go in and do what he does for Ohio State. I can't say I have full faith in Pete Werner and Tuff Borland. They were good last week. They've been good all season. But I have faith in these guys to do enough. And like I said, my final prediction, 59-49, both teams get on the board a lot. But like I said, official pick still Alabama to not jinx my team, but I do have that gut feeling.
You might be playing.
Keep saying it. I
might be playing with the jinx a little bit by kind of talking about how you may or may not think Ohio State's actually going to win this thing, but the official pick is Alabama for Reid.
The official pick is Alabama by 10.
The official pick is Ohio State for me. I've got the Buckeyes. Reid, anything you got to say before we wrap this thing up?
Well, one thing I got to say, I don't know how a lot of Ohio State fans feel about this, but after that Clemson win, obviously I want Ohio State to win a national championship. Who doesn't want their team to win the national title game? But I will say, as long as Ohio State doesn't lose this game by an embarrassing score, knock on wood, I think you still got to be proud of this team for what they did against Clemson. I mean, that's you can't say program changing win because Ohio State's already established themselves as an elite program. And that's not going to change the direction of the program. But that win is huge for the Ohio State program. To go against a team whom they've never beaten in their history, and a team that's flat out embarrassed them the last 3 times they've met, and especially last season with that ugly taste they had in their mouth after the loss to Clemson, to be able to overcome all that and to get a win, not only get a win in such a dominant fashion. You got to be proud of this Ohio State team, no matter how they do in this championship game. Like I said, unless Ohio State goes out here and lays an egg, I'm going to be happy with this season. I'm going to look back on it and say that was a good season. It was a great team, and I'm proud of Ohio State for no matter how they perform in the national championship.
I think that's the right way to look at it.
The way they did against Clemson.
Yeah,
and that Clemson win, I think obviously every team in college football, or really everybody in America, I think outside of Alabama fans themselves, I think everybody in America hates Alabama, and especially Ohio State, another blue blood. We obviously hate Alabama. Who doesn't?
And you could also make the argument that everybody outside of Columbus hates Ohio State.
Yeah, and you're right about that. Yeah, and with these blue blood programs, but I mean Alabama, they're a team, especially under Nick Saban, they've been so dominant. You want to beat Alabama every chance you get. Obviously, that's the goal, and that just goes to show how incredible of a program Alabama is. They're the benchmark for excellence in their sport. But you obviously want to go beat Alabama every chance you get. And nothing would make me happier. Nothing would make me happier than to beat Alabama in 2 straight playoff games. This is obviously the last meeting. That was the Sugar Bowl win game. I still look back on, still one of my favorite sporting events of all time, that 2015 Sugar Bowl. So obviously you want to get a win here, but I think that Clemson win, not much is going to top that. And I mean, obviously the national championship is the national championship, but to beat a team that has just slapped Ohio State around and abused them throughout their history in that big of a stage, in the fashion in which they won that game, that's going to be the game you look back and remember years from now. That's going to be the game that really means the most in the season. So I'm proud of my team for going out and doing that. And I think I can be at least somewhat happy with this season when I look back, no matter how it ends up on Monday.
And the Buckeyes already pulled off a playoff upset in the Sugar Bowl. Can they complete the other parts of that magical season 6 years ago by beating Alabama and winning a national championship? A lot of parallels between those 2 years. We'll see if they can get it done Monday night in South Florida. Reid's got Alabama. I've got the Ohio State Buckeyes. Regardless, we think it's going to be a good one. And there's going to be a lot to watch for, a lot to keep an eye on. And we promise we'll have a recap right after the game. We'll keep you posted. For Reid Murray, I'm Patrick Feltz. Thank you for listening to the First and 10 podcast, and we'll see you next time. Take care.